2 Chronicles and chapter 14, page 268. And it's my guess that every single one of us knows what it's like to feel overwhelmed by what feels like an impossible situation which is totally beyond our control. If you don't know what that's like, I'm fairly sure that in the future you will one day feel what that is like. You will know what that's like. And it may be this evening that is how you are feeling. You feel overwhelmed by what feels like an impossible situation which is totally beyond your control. And it could be because of a spiritual battle that you are going through where there seems to be no breakthrough, or an extremely serious spiritual concern that you have about someone else, or crippling health struggles, or family worries, or money or employment problems, stresses at school that even the holidays haven't taken away. The list, it could go on and on and on. And often it's not just one problem, it's a combination of problems that intertwine with each other, overwhelming challenges. Situations that just dwarf you and tower over you, trials and issues that you haven't got the human resources for to cope with all by yourself. Well, if you do feel overwhelmed at the moment, then I think you know a little of how Asa felt in verse 9. The scouts have come in and the spine-chilling reports have been given. Zerah, the king of Ethiopia, has attacked. Asa mobilizes his army, and maybe he's feeling reasonably confident given that he's got over 500,000 men at his disposal. Verse 8, mighty men of valor armed with shields and bows and spears. But then, having marched down from Jerusalem towards the Jewish city of Mareshah and seen the ranks of the Ethiopian army, Asa must have nearly fainted. For there before him was an army that was almost twice as big as his. I don't know how 1,000,000 men line up in battle formation if that's what they did, but what does it do to your stress levels to see line after line after line of soldiers beyond what your eye can see? I have to be honest, I would be totally useless in a war. Don't know about you, but I would be totally useless in a war. I mean, when I was younger, I used to get nervous playing cowboys and Indians with my friends. Whenever I go paintballing, I'm the one at the back encouraging everyone else to go forward, so I'm the one that doesn't get hit. I will be totally useless in the war. And yet, this is not playing cowboys and Indians or going paintballing. This is for real. This is a real war with real weapons and a real enemy, an enemy that is twice as big as your army. And Asa is the one that everyone is looking to. He is the king, he is the leader. He is the one who has to make the decisions about what they do. He is the one who has to lead forward the army, and it's on his shoulders that this rests. And how is Asa feeling? And what is Asa going to do? Verse 11. And Asa cried to the Lord his God, O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you. And in your name we have come against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you. Now, before we get to verses 9 to 15, we're going to spend some time looking at verses 1 to 8. Because that will help us to understand verses 9 to 15. The two halves of the chapter fit together. And as we spend some time looking at verses 1 to 8, we see that Asa and Judah were enjoying God-given rest. Asa and Judah were enjoying God-given rest. So verse 1, Asa is the new king. And to help you get your historical bearings, Asa's granddad is Rehoboam, under whose reign the kingdom of Israel painfully split into two, leaving Rehoboam with only two of Israel's tribes, the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin, which together really become known as Judah. Rehoboam reigns for 17 years, and there is continual war between Israel and Judah throughout his reign. Asa's dad is Abijah. Abijah only reigns for 3 years, but you can see from the previous chapter that his reign is also marked by war. So Judah's recent past has been turbulent and traumatic, to say the least. As Asa is a young lad growing up in the royal courts, all he knows is threats and attacks and enemies and war and conflict and hostility. Now, the influences surrounding Asa as he's growing up were not good. So Asa's granddad, Rehoboam, he's summed up, if you look at the end of chapter 12, as doing evil and not setting his heart to seek God. Asa's dad, Abijah, we're told in 1 Kings 15, walked in the sins of his father. And there were 1 or 2 other family members who carved out positions for themselves within the royal court who were not a good influence or very godly. So the influences surrounding Asa as he's growing up as a young boy, they are not good. And yet the summary of Asa's life that is given in verse 2 is that Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. So Asa did not allow his life to be defined by the ungodly influences that he was surrounded by. A question for you as we think of the summary of Asa's life in verse 2. How will God summarize your life? What will be the epitaph that God writes for you? Do you ever think about that? If you are young, it's certain that you are surrounded wherever you look by ungodly influences. But we learn here from Asa that that doesn't have to determine the direction of your life. With God's help, you can swim against the tide. You don't have to go the way of the crowd. Because of grace, Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the one who really mattered. And one of the ways in which we can see this is by the reforms that Asa made in verse 3. So he took away the foreign altars and the high places and broke down the pillars and cut down the Asherim. Asa really wanted the people of Judah to return to the true worship of God, and so he got rid of the idols and the altars that were being used in the worship of these false gods, many of which were associated with sensuality and sex and fertility rites. Now, you and I face a constant battle with idols, a constant battle. All around us, we are surrounded by idols and false gods and people who worship these idols. And not only is that all around us, but our own hearts are like a factory, it's been described, a factory that just churns out idols constantly. We seem to have this magnetic attraction to worship what is wrong or to give priority to something that we shouldn't. You remember how the Apostle John finished his first letter with those 4 words, keep yourself from idols. So this is a constant battle for us. This is an area where we need to be on watch all of the time. And so it's worth just spending a few seconds or moments thinking for yourself as we picture Asa going from place to place, sorting out these idols. It's worth thinking for yourself, what idols do you struggle with? What are you particularly susceptible to? What wrong temples do you go and worship at? What wrong altars do you bow down before? So it could be that you worship at the temple of self, and you are the idol in your life. Or it could be that you bow down to the altar of wanting to be liked, or money, or food, or drink, or sex, or relationships, or family, or children, or your work, or possessions, or pleasure, or success, or sport, or maybe it's something else. Now, for the most part, Judah's idols and false gods, it was quite clear to see that they were idols and false gods. For us, it's perhaps slightly more complicated. Because for us, so often, our false gods are just good things that God has given to us, which we've turned into gods. Or they're God's good gifts, which we've twisted and we've perverted, and we're trying to enjoy them in a way that is wrong. And yet you notice the robustness of Asa's actions in verse 3. He took away, he broke down, he cut down. He was wholehearted in his efforts to remove these idols and gods from Judah's life. And he didn't just do it in Jerusalem, but he did it in Judah's other cities as well in verse 5. And so it makes us ask the question, are we half-hearted or are we wholehearted in our efforts to keep ourselves from idols? One of the things that I've recognized in myself and I've recognized in other people also is that there are times where we do want to stop worshiping at the wrong temple, and we do want to stop worshiping at the wrong altar. We know that it's wrong. It makes us feel guilty. It makes us feel ashamed. We know that it's sin, and yet we want to keep worshiping the idol more than we want to stop. And so our efforts to stop are half-hearted, and they are insincere, and they allow us to have the opportunity to continue to worship what we shouldn't, and they keep us in this cycle of sin and failure and guilt and shame. Well, Asa was not like that here. He was not half-hearted, he was wholehearted. He truly wanted Judah to stop worshipping idols, and so he tried to remove every opportunity that they had to worship them. He just tried to get rid of them. But not only did he deal with the negative, you notice in verse 4 that he encouraged the positive. So he commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to keep the law and the commandment. So Asa's desire to deal with idol worship wasn't just motivated by a surface moral change. It was motivated by this desire for Judah to grow in their relationship with God, to have no other gods before him, to put him first, to go deeper with him, to know him better and better, to walk in obedience to his commandments and his law and his word. And because of this, we see that God gave Judah rest from their enemies. You see that in these verses. In fact, you see that rest is the big theme of this passage. So verse 1, in his days the land had rest for 10 years. So 10 years without war or conflict or fighting. Verse 5, and the kingdom had rest under him. Same word. Verse 6, the land had rest. Same word. Verse 6 again, he had no war in those years, for the Lord gave him peace. Now the word behind peace also means rest. It's a different word to the word that we've seen so far. It means to settle down. And it's the same word as the word behind peace in verse 7. So you have this big theme that is running through these verses of rest. Rest. Rest from war. Rest from fighting. Rest from conflict. Rest from division. Rest from threats. Rest from attack. Judah had not been at rest. Their recent past had been traumatic and turbulent and had been marked by wars and fighting and conflict, but now they are at rest. And the reason for this rest, Asa tells the people in verse 7, is because they have sought the Lord and God has given to them rest. And this is the general principle, isn't it? When we seek the Lord, when we put him first, when we have no other gods before him, when we walk in obedience to his voice and his commandments and his law, God, he gives us rest. He gives us peace and rest. And in the New Testament, this is not military rest, this is spiritual rest, peace with God. Rest in our souls. You remember what Jesus said in Matthew 11 at the end of the chapter, where he says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When you come to Jesus for forgiveness and you put your trust in him, you find rest for your souls, peace with God, as he forgives us and he reconciles us to himself. And in doing so, as we allow ourselves to be joined and yoked to him, walking with him in his pathways, learning from him and listening to him, keeping his commandments and obeying his voice, it's in him and it's there that we don't just experience that initial peace and rest, but we have ongoing rest. We have ongoing peace. And if you're not a Christian here this evening, I want to tell you that there is wonderful rest available for you in Jesus. And if you are a Christian here this evening, let me remind you that there is wonderful rest in Jesus for you. Maybe you have got trapped in that cycle of sin and failure and guilt and shame. As you continue to allow idols to dominate your life, or particular sins to dominate your life, well, let me remind you that there is rest in Jesus. There is rest in his sacrifice, and there is rest in the way in which he wants you to live. As you put him first and let him be your teacher and walk in his ways. In his ways, you will find rest. So verses 1 to 8, it's all about rest. It's all about rest. It's all about God-given rest. But then secondly, verses 9 to 15, we see the theme of resting on God. Resting on God. Asa knew that the general principle was that if you seek God and put him first, he will give you rest. But he also knew that that didn't mean that their rest wouldn't be threatened or come under attack. And so in verses 6 to 8, he uses this period of rest to strengthen Judah's defenses and enlarge her army. And yet, as these spine-chilling reports come in from his scouts that the king of Ethiopia has attacked, and Asa mobilizes his enlarged army and he goes out to meet the threat. As he looks over this army which just dwarfs his army in verse 9, Asa, he must have thought that his efforts have just been wasted. What was the point in building up their defenses when they face an army like this? This army that they face has 1 million men in it. 1 million men. What does that do to your blood pressure? Judah has no chance. Their opponent is double their size. They tower over them. It would be a bit like me trying to take on the captain of the British Lions rugby team. Just no chance. And yet it's in this overwhelming situation that Asa cries out to God what he does in verse 11. And Asa cried to the Lord his God, "O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you. And in your name we have come against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you." And so this evening, if you feel like you're Asa and you're facing a problem or a struggle or an issue or a situation or a challenge which is just overwhelming and there is no way that you can deal with it by yourself, let me point out 8 things from Asa's prayer as you face your Ethiopian army. And the first, very simply, And very basically is that in his desperation, he cried out to the Lord. I know it's just a very, very simple point to make, but in his desperate situation, he prayed to the Lord about it. He cried out to God about it. He took it to the Lord. How often in your struggles do you spend your time worrying about your problems rather than talking to God about them? Or how often in your struggles do you tell your friends about them, but you don't take it to your best friend? Asa, he cried out to the Lord. He turned to the Lord. He took it to the Lord. The second thing is that he prayed to a God who he knew personally. Asa cried to the Lord, his God. He says later on in the prayer, he says, "Oh Lord, you are our God." If you are a Christian, never forget that God is your God. Never forget that God is your God. God has given himself to you. God has given himself to you. And this is underlined by Asa's use of the name Yahweh, Lord in capital letters. He uses God's name, Yahweh, 4 times in this short prayer. Asa knew God as Judah's personal, relational, covenant-keeping God who has made a covenant with his people and who would never break his covenant. And you know, God has bound himself to you in Jesus with an unbreakable bond. He has made an eternal covenant with you, and he is for you, and he is never against you. He is never against you. He is your God, and he's given himself to you. And the third thing is that Asa knew that God could help. Asa knew that God could help. Asa's prayer is a bit like Jehoshaphat's prayer in chapter 20 and verse 6, as Jehoshaphat also faced a great army and prayed, "O Lord, God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven? You rule over all the kingdoms of the nations. In your hand are power and might, so that none is able to withstand you." Jehoshaphat, in his prayer, he acknowledged God's ability to help. And Asa here, he's acknowledging God's ability to help. He prays, "Oh Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak." Now you notice that what Asa is praying there in verse 11 is not only that God is able to help in this desperate situation where the weak face the mighty, but that actually God specializes in helping in this kind of situation. There is none like you to help. Indeed, this is God's normal way of working, of helping the weak against the mighty, of helping those who are just overwhelmed by problems that they just cannot sort out by themselves. You think of how God deliberately reduced Gideon's army to 300 men so that when they defeated the Midianites, who were far greater than them, it was God who got the glory. As you face your Ethiopian army, remember that God, he loves to help the weak against the mighty. Fourthly, it was a trusting prayer. It was a trusting prayer. Asa told God, "We rely on you. We rely on you." Now that word for rely is the kind of word that you would use to describe someone depending on something or leaning upon something or resting upon something. Indeed, in a few other places in the Bible, it's translated as rest. So, for example, in Judges 16, when Samson is a prisoner in that Philistine temple, and he has it in mind that he wants to kind of collapse the pillars and bring the temple down. He describes the temple as resting on the pillars. The pillars are taking the weight of the temple. The temple is depending on the pillars. The pillars are supporting the temple. The temple is resting on the pillars. And here Asa is telling God that they are resting on him. You see, that's why the theme of rest in this chapter, it makes this prayer particularly poignant again and again and again. The blessing of rest has been described. Verse 1, verse 5, verse 6, verse 6 again, verse 7, rest. Rest from their enemies. Rest from hostilities. Rest from war. Rest from fighting. Rest from conflict. And yet now their rest has been taken away. And yet Asa says to God, we rest on you. This is a different kind of rest. It's a rest that relies upon. It's a rest that depends upon. It's a rest that leans upon. It's a rest that looks to God to uphold you and support you and help you. As you face your Ethiopian enemy this evening, you have a God who is able to take all of your weight and the overwhelming problem that you face. You have a God that you can lean upon, that you can depend upon. A God who can give you peace, even when all the things that normally give you peace have been taken away. And then fifthly, notice that it was a prayer that showed that this was God's battle even more than theirs. Asa told God that it was in his name that they were going. They were his people. They were representing him. They were facing an enemy that was invading the land that God had given to them, meaning that it was God's reputation on the line. With Asa praying at the end, "O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you." You see what Asa is saying? Asa is saying, he's saying, it's not just our battle, God, it's your battle. You know, so often the battles we face, they're not just our battles. Even more so, they are God's battles. And he is the one that we need to fix our eyes upon, instead of looking for the strength in ourselves. And then sixthly, see that it was a prayer that was effective. Verse 11, Asa cries out to God, and verses 12 to 15, the Lord, he gives an overwhelming victory. And we're not told exactly how God shattered his enemies, but it's comprehensive, isn't it? And the Ethiopians run, and Judah chases. The Ethiopians are overthrown, and they are routed to such an extent that they cannot recover, and they are broken. And Asa not only defeats them, but it looks like he goes into Philistine territory in verse 14, and the cities around Gerar, and defeats them as well. And they carry back these huge spoils of war. And God, he completely wins the day. It's an effective prayer. And keeping in mind this victory and the extent of it, notice that it's a very short prayer. Asa didn't pray a long prayer. I counted up the words quickly in our English version. I think it's 48 words. Only 48 words, and an army of 1 million is beaten. You think of the power of even a tiny prayer, because that tiny prayer is prayed to a mighty God. It's not wrong to pray long prayers, but you don't have to string lots of words together to persuade God to hear you. You think of what Jesus said in Matthew 6. He said, when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. And then our final observation, and that is that as we think of King Asa crying out to God as he faces this immense battle and this enormous enemy, we think of King Jesus, and we think of him on the night that he was betrayed, the night before the cross. We think of him in Gethsemane as it was the hour of the power of darkness, as he faced the greatest battle that would ever be fought, as he faced the greatest enemy that would ever be faced. And Luke describes him, and he's in agony. It's like he's overwhelmed by what he's facing. And he's sweating great drops of blood in his distress, and he's crying out to God. And we think of the victory that he achieved and the redemption that he secured, helping us to remember that though some of the problems we face, they will not be taken away in this life. His victory guarantees that in the life to come, they will. There will one day be that full and final victory. Even though you may not see your problem taken away now, one day you will in Jesus. And Jesus he's able to help us to endure and to persevere and give us the strength to keep on going as we rest on him. And we depend on him. And we lean on him. And we let him take our weight, and we let him take the weight of our problem. And we look forward to that final day when he will give us the victor's crown that Jesus has won for us. 2 Chronicles 14, verse 11. And Asa cried to the Lord his God, "O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you. And in your name we have come against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you." Amen.